Hello and welcome to Learn the Bible. Today we are on post 217. This is going to be on Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 1 to 9. And the title is Unsolved Mysteries. So, as we've gone through Deuteronomy, God has been, through Moses, telling the people again, reiterating the laws. And he specifically talks about what to do with death. So we had talked about with murder, it was going to be a life for a life. If somebody's a murderer, capital punishment was to be instituted. Then we talked about manslaughter. What if somebody accidentally killed someone and how the person who accidentally killed could flee to the city of refuge, have their trial, and determine whether there truly it was an accident or not. And then after the death of the high priest, they could be freed and without suffering vengeance from the family of those who had died. Well, now we get to unsolved deaths. How is it that the people of Israel were to deal if they were to find a dead body? And God addresses this here in Deuteronomy 21, where he says that if someone finds a dead body, there needs to be an investigation. They need to see what caused it. And if they can't figure it out, it is going to be the responsibility of the nearest city. So they would find out, okay, which city is closest to the spot where this person died. We need to bring their elders, their judges out because it's technically within their jurisdiction or they're the closest ones. And they would come out, and assuming they could find no evidence of this murderer, they would come out and ask God's forgiveness. They would bring this person, they would bring again this body. They would obviously take care of the body, but they would have to ask God's forgiveness so that no judgment would fall on the city. So the priests would then come out. They would hear the confession from the leaders or the elders of the city, and they would say, "We are innocent of this blood." And of course, a young cow, a young animal, young heifer would come out and it would be decapitated essentially as payment, as an offering to say that it's not on us that this blood is. We are innocent of this crime. And of course, that cow had to be very young in the sense that it had never been attached to any work. It was also an innocent cow. It was taking the blame for whoever killed this person. Now, this is a fascinating passage because when it comes to harming people, whenever people go through bad things, it's always a problem. Sin and the death that it leads to is always a problem. Death has always been the enemy. That's why Jesus had to overcome death by not just being crucified on the cross and being buried, but also to rise again. So death has been the enemy, and it was the first enemy ever since Adam and Eve first sinned. Death entered the world. But Jesus says the last enemy to be destroyed is death. But in this particular scenario, we see back in ancient Israel, they were never to ignore evil. Even if they couldn't find the criminal, they were to mourn the death of the innocent. The Bible tells us as Christians that we are to mourn with those that mourn. Whenever we hear about evil things happening, we shouldn't be ignoring it. Rather, we should be trying to prevent it and trying to let the world know, no, evil is not okay. Whether you've hurt our friends or whether you've hurt our enemies, we do not allow evil to occur. So innocent people also ought to be protected by their leaders. We live in societies, we live under governments. And again, the leaders, they should be seeking God's mercy for when they fail to protect the innocent, as should society as a whole. So this offering is made to God, again, to ask them to not hold the city accountable, asking God to forgive the city for the death of this person within their jurisdiction. But what this is really telling us, again, personally, is that we aren't just responsible for ourselves. We're also responsible for others. We always think, well, I'm here to protect myself and my family, which is true. But are you also here to protect your neighbor? Jesus has a lot to say about loving your neighbor. The Bible also tells us that God hates the hands that shed innocent blood. He also doesn't love those people who would act. He loves the people, I should say, but he does not love it whenever we accept evil being done, when we're silent when evil happens. Not only should we not be involved in murder, we also shouldn't even be involved in hatred towards someone, even someone who opposes us, and especially if it's without a cause. We should mourn when other people are hurt. Again, God talks about and tells us that there are those who live in sin. Not only do they do evil, but they also approve of those who do evil. That's in Romans. So that is something that we ought not to do. So as a society, we should pray for our leaders. We should pray that they make righteous judgment, that they seek God's will in their lives, that they help to rule righteously. And then again, when evil falls in the land, We ought to pray for the land. We ought to pray for our government. We ought to pray for them, and we ought to stop the evil when we can. God has judged individuals throughout history, and God has judged nations throughout history. He's judged entire civilizations. And as a member of our current civilization, wherever you live, you ought to stand for the truth. You ought to never become a passive observer of sin and corruption. I promise if you look around your city, you're going to find evidence of sin. You're going to find evidence of problems, of hurt, of people who have been hurt by sin. And it's good if you're praying for help in the city. But also, can you be part of the solution? Could you be a light in your city? Can people see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven? It's not good works that save us, but we do good works because we're saved. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and we'll catch you next time on Learn the Bible.